Welcome everyone to another episode of Safe Passages. I'm Tara Jabari, and today I have my favorite professor from Georgetown University when I was in graduate school, Dr. Janine Turner. Thank you, Dr. Turner, for coming
Oh,
on.
Tara, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you. We had so much fun talking, so I was so excited when you reached out.
Yes, well, okay. So, one of the things that I wanted to come back to graduate school was when
Hmm.
I lived a year in New Zealand and I had started a year-long program to edit and produce for a documentary television series called Baha'i on
Hmm.
Air that mostly aired throughout the South Pacific. And
Hmm.
we were able to go to Vanuatu. I had never heard of the country, but apparently it's one of the happiest countries in the world. It is a poor country, considered like more of a third world country. And we went there for conferences,
Hmm.
or a main conference, and we had to upload footage. We had to be in contact with people in New Zealand, parts of America, things like that.
Hmm.
But because the reception wasn't the best, here I am in Port Vila, the capital. Everyone is so delightful. There's over 1,800 people from 5 countries, like French Polynesia, New Caledonia, obviously Vanuatu. And I they were so lovely because they're used to not having so much technology around them, and we were too distracted
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
we were like, I cannot get this text in, I cannot get this email out, I cannot upload this video, you know, and when can I have the. So I was like, oh, so technology, as much as it has brought us together, it can
Hmm.
still really divide us. So I wanted to go back to
Hmm.
school so that we can use it as a tool and not make it an addiction or
Hmm. Hmm.
worsen the division.
Right.
And part of the communications culture and technology program at Georgetown University, I think there's only two really main required classes. And then the
Hmm.
rest of the 2 year program really depends on the student and what they want to make of it. And I decided to, again, focus on that. And I did a lot of independent study. And you were working on research to write a book about presence theory or social
Hmm.
presence theory. Could you
Hmm.
explain that?
Absolutely. So I think when people think about presence, what it means to be presence, a lot of the research or thought has been around kind of like internal presence or mindfulness. And what I really thought about is exactly to your point, Tara, when you talked about how your ability to be connected with people in real time or space was diminished by this concern about needing to be in another space at the same time. I really thought it was important for us to start thinking about what does it mean to be socially present? And that doesn't necessarily mean face to face, but what does it mean to feel connected to another person at any one time? And because we were becoming more and more distracted by technology, the need to be intentional about how and when we are present has been really important. So that's kind of where that started.
Yeah. So over the 2 years that I was at CCT, as we called it, for communication, culture, and technology, I kind of, I would say about a year and a half of that, maybe half of that time, um, we helped with the, I was like a research assistant when we not only took some interviews, but we'd also
Hmm.
get other students' interviews and like kind of, not, what is it, transact? No,
Yeah, transcribe.
transcribe. Thank you. Transcribe them to see how did people develop their, like, concentrate on their presence or budget
Right,
it or really hone
right.
down on one conversation and things like that, all over
Hmm.
the spectrum of different ages, different backgrounds. And it was super interesting to hear all of those stuff. And then you eventually finally were able to get it published.
Hmm.
And it's here.
Yeah,
And you can
thank
see all
you.
my
That
fun, my little
your
things
little.
because they have little faces on them. Um, but so I wanted to go over the presence choices that you kind of talk about,
Hmm.
really. There's four
Hmm.
types.
Hmm.
budgeted, entitled, competitive, and invitational.
Hmm.
And sort of a little bit about them, and then we'll go over it.
Sure.
So, can you just
Yeah.
define budgeted presence?
Sure. So when I really started thinking about how to be intentional about our social presence, I tried to think about what are all the different types you could be in. And we had, as Tara, you mentioned, we just interviewed people, looked at all these different spaces, and really it came down to four. And budgeted presence really describes how you're feeling when you're trying to pay attention to multiple people at one time. You're budgeting just like you think about allocating part of your attention to one person, part to someone else. So you're really trying to figure out how efficient can I be about my presence, really thinking about how can I get the most done. So I might allocate part of my presence to you, part to someone else. People really see that if they're on a video meeting and they're not really needed to be interacting as much. They might be checking their email or texting while they're also on in the meeting. And I saw that multi-communicating is what I called a behavior that really started right at the kind of diffusion of the smartphone, but it's just become more and more prevalent. And so budgeted presence is really budgeting your social presence among your audiences.
Yeah, and also there was a point where you said, what is the difference between multitasking and multi-communicating?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really great point because I think there's been a lot of research saying we can't multitask, and maybe 3% of the population is super taskers. And multitasking is really a very routine task and another routine task and trying to do it at the same time. So if you take a complex task like communication, where I'm trying to manage my relationship with you, my understanding of my trust with you, what I know about you, values, histories, and beliefs, all of that, while I'm also managing that same kind of complex behavior with another person, it's actually incredibly complicated to multi-communicate. So that's why I thought it was really important to differentiate because people think they can multitask when they actually can't. Imagine how much harder it is to multi-communicate, engage in multiple conversations at once.
Yeah. Um, and then you were saying, when should you choose to budget? The
I think to completely when should I sh when do, should you use budgeting? I mean, to say that we don't do shouldn't do that is ridiculous. I mean, we spend probably 90% of our time with our phone, looking at our phone, checking our phone. So I think when you're thinking about trying to be as efficient as you can, and when the people that you're with recognize that you are working in some other area at once. I think the worst thing, we've all been in this situation where you're trying to talk with someone and then you notice that they're budging their presence and it just makes you feel like, wow, I'm not that important. So to the extent to which um, I would say that if the task is really important because you have a million things going on, but then you also have to manage your relationship as well, letting the other person know what you're doing or making sure that they don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And but there are some benefits of budgeting.
Absolutely, because you're going to get more things done. I mean, if I'm, and unfortunately, and I teach communication here at the at Georgetown, is we as speakers are often not very effective in terms of we bring an audience together. We don't necessarily have relevant information, but we are demanding their presence. And so we're going on and on about something when someone doesn't really even feel like it connects to them. I feel like post-COVID, people are very careful about their time. And so you've had more and more people where their video isn't working, their audio isn't working. I mean, obviously, I mean, how can we have so much bad technology post COVID? But it's because people are just trying to get more things done. And I think we're just overwhelmed. So when you're trying to get multiple tasks done, it does make sense to do that. Or if there's an emergency that you have to get to, it does make sense to do that. If you aren't central to the audience either, you don't feel you're central, or the other person doesn't feel you're central, then it's not as offensive to do that. But when you have to manage the relationship and you're worried about some of the extra cues that are going to require more concentration, that's when budget is problematic.
Which leads to more the entitled presence. Can you define entitled?
Sure. So if you're in budgeted presence, you're not worried about what another person's doing. You're just kind of focusing on your own needs. You're trying to manage multiple conversations at once. When you try to start decide what your audience does, that's when you're trying to control the social presence of someone else. And the first way to control is to just remove distractions from that person. So it's entitled, which sounds, some people thought that that was a little bit of a pejorative title, but It's entitled because I'm saying my presence and what I want to do with my presence and your presence is more important than whatever else you want to do. So I'm taking your technology away, or I'm asking you to put it away and just value my conversation and not anyone else's. So what you're pretty much doing is trying to control their attention by controlling the technology. What it can work if the other person really, if you have a lot of status or you're at power, or and the other person, like if I'm going to tell you, put your phones away, I'm going to tell you how you're going to win $1 million. Of course, everyone's like happy to do it.
Yeah.
So to the extent to which there's an incentive there, it can work. The challenge is because people have such a almost a right to their phone these days. They feel as if they should be able to have it at all times. For someone else to tell you what you can do with your phone almost seems like way too invasive. So it's interesting. Over time, I've seen less and less people ever use entitled presence.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing these interviews, a lot of the time we'd think, oh, the top answer was either a parent disciplining their child
Hmm.
or in school, the
Right,
professor with their students. You
right,
put away everything. The only reason
right,
why you had your laptop was to take notes.
right,
But usually we still came from a generation where we remembered we handwrite notes. Um,
right.
and actually, in the book, there was an example of a couple of people saying, "Oh, this is a very generational thing
Mm,
of this entitlement that you can take away their distractions,
right.
predominantly technology." But what was interesting is I noticed that from my interviews, because I was able to go in the DC area, I have relatives that are the grandparents and their children and then their grandchildren. So we had these three
Hmm.
generations, and every Sunday they had dinner. So I'd go once a month to the Sunday dinners. And so I went to go talk to them,
Hmm.
right? So we had about baby boomers, um, and then all the way to whatever the kids are called these days.
Yeah.
um, Anyone who's
Generation
born in the
Z. Yeah.
2000s and
Yeah.
2010s. And so between the ones who were like baby boomers and a little older, were used to not having their technology with them because they grew up a very much of their life without having technology with them at all times.
Yeah.
Um, and then the 2000s and the 2010s kids were also like, oh, I don't bring my phone always with me everywhere. Mostly because they have it so often. It's sort of, well, it's nice to have a break. I'm here with
Yeah.
the family. Or they've kind of figured out an establishment at the school to be like, nope, you have to put it away, put it in your locker, all sorts of
Hmm.
thing. It's in the middle ground where they're not sure what the protocol is.
Yeah.
And that I was like, that's an interesting thing that they think it's generational. I'm like, it kind of is, and it kind of is not the way that you think. There's hope
Right.
for the future because they kind
Right.
of,
And
yeah, they're used to
because
it.
I don't know, and I think more and more people are talking about like detox times where you put your phone away and not have it around. So there's more of that. But what's challenging is it's being focused on my own needs and me getting my own things done and me focusing on myself is not generational. That is like across the board, right? And what's challenging about the phone is there is a device that allows you to focus on your own needs when you're bored in a conversation, when you don't feel people are giving your attention. So I think that it's just another way of, well, it's okay. You might say it's just another way of daydreaming. Is that just because I'm talking with you and we're in the same room doesn't mean I have your attention. But the challenge with a device like this is you might be looking at it just to check the weather, but then you see a text and then you see this. And so quickly you can get drawn in. So it's really important to think about the impact it has on the people around you. And I agree that I think it is not just generational, but kind of um, more of an interest in answering my own needs, not necessarily that of my audience.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other point was because the cost of entitlement, or not, yeah, the cost of entitlement, it was the potential loss of credibility that you talk
Yep.
about. Because if you're going to take everyone's devices away or any of their
Yeah.
other distractions, the way that they can budget to get more stuff done, you better
Right.
have something that's worth their time.
Exactly. And I definitely saw that post COVID is that it's not even just about it's about being entitled about I can control your presence. So it might not be taking your technology away. It might be saying you have to come into the office for a face-to-face meeting because I want to talk to you face to face.
Mm.
And then the person comes all the way in and they're like, "Oh, this is a complete waste of my time." So they don't just factor in the time that you're spending talking to them. They're also factoring in their drive time, all the things they
That's true.
missed because they couldn't be there. So entitled is this idea that I'm controlling the type of presence that you have access to. And in some ways it makes it easier if you're in a organization that does it for you. Like if you're in a building that doesn't have good Wi-Fi, or you're in a skiff or something where you can't get outside because of this, I don't know, some political reason or some um, surveillance situation that you
Hmm.
can't have access to Wi-Fi in a specific space. There's almost like you don't have the same, who am I to take someone else's technology away? And so if anything that's kind of changing over time is the sense that I have the ability to ask someone else to do something with their technology. I think that is becoming less and less prevalent.
Yeah. Well, then it comes into the competitive. I feel like these are always kind of. Did you also do this where it's like a hierarchy, budgeted,
Yes,
entitled,
because
competitive?
yeah, because I feel like budgeted, you're not concerned about your audience at all. Entitled, you're trying to control your audience and pretty much treat them like this container, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then competitive, I'm acknowledging that I can't control your space or what you do with your technology. And because of that, I need to be really good at my messaging. I need to be relevant. I need to understand what your needs are. And I have to make sure my message is focused on what you need. And what I love about competitive presence is we've always had to do that I mean, since the time of Aristotle, logos,
Yeah.
pathos, and ethos as you're thinking about your messaging. But we didn't have the same kind of signals that people really do not care about what you're talking about as we do now. Used to be kind of people kind of polite, or they didn't have anywhere else they could be because they're in a room with you, so they acted like they were paying attention. Now they could be so many other places. They show it on their phone, and so competitive presence is just this very intentional understanding that I really do have to compete with other devices and other messages for the attention of my audience. And what do I need to do to be as relevant as I possibly can?
Yeah, and I remember, especially with professors, when we would either interview them or interview people on, can you think of a time where someone competed to get your attention? They would
Yeah.
think, oh, our professor would get on on top of his desk. And then we're like looking and we're like, what is he doing? And they're like, oh, you do see me. Great. Now that I have your attention. And I always remembered in math, in elementary school, one of our classmates full on fell asleep.
Oh my gosh.
So that was a whole other thing. It was just like he wasn't even present.
It,
So, and our
I can't.
teacher noticed it. And so he's like, everyone stay quiet. And he went and went really quiet, went next to the guy's ear and like whistled. And that was his, I don't know if that's competitive or entitlement or a little bit of both,
Yeah,
but sort of
like
like,
just to pull them in. Yeah.
yeah.
I feel
So
it definitely competitive to get everyone else's attention on what he was doing.
yeah.
Everyone to see what would happen.
And a lot of times I feel like children are very much like, look at me, or mom, look at me, that kind of thing
Yeah,
of, I have something to say, stop
right,
looking at your phone,
right,
because they discovered something. And then you're like,
right.
yeah, I knew that. But then
Yeah,
again, you've only been on this planet for 5 years, so you didn't know that
yeah.
this happened. So it's kind of cute. But it was an interesting thing of
That's a good
how
example.
people get creative, right? They'll do
Yeah,
jumping jacks, they'll do, all sorts of, they'll scream, they'll do this or that.
right.
Or the other one is like, they'll be talking and then they realize, oh, you're not listening. So then they just stay quiet.
Yes,
And
a
then the
lot of people would
person,
just choose not talking at all, exactly as a way to get through the busyness with the silence.
yeah. And then they'll be like, wait, I, oh, what? And they're like,
Am I supposed
I
to?
just
Yeah,
noticed that you weren't paying attention. So I'm like waiting until you're done.
yeah.
So, and I was like, that is a good one because we're used to the noise.
Yes,
And yeah.
constant.
So it was really cool. And then there was The 6 strategies, yes, that tended to work in persuasions for competitiveness, right? And you guys, you go reward, punish, expertise, I can't say this,
Reciprocity.
reciprocity,
Yep.
and then the appeal to internal. So that's that, no, internal and personal commitments.
Mm-hmm.
And this was interesting. The most common ones sounded like it was the reward and the punishment
Mm-hmm.
kind of idea of it. But could you kind of touch on those?
Sure. So I think it really gets at, if you're thinking about it from a message standpoint, it's why should this person listen to you? So the best way to think about it is what is it about your message is solving their problem? What is it about whatever you're trying to get them to do solves some need that they have? And what's challenging from a kind of competitive present standpoint is the distraction and the competition for that space is pretty high, especially because your device has so many things that you could be interested in, and not just exciting or fun, but just all the things that you need to get done because other people are pressuring you to do things. So I think really focusing in on who's my audience, what do they care about, and what matters to them. Why should they be relevant? Why is what am I talking about needs to be relevant to them, either from an external standpoint from their experience or internally? How is it that I can help them? Because reciprocity, I'm going to listen to you because you listen to me. It's really just managing managing the technology, but you might not actually have their attention. They're just being quiet because they feel like they have to be. So it's the best way to get to competitive presence is you're truly competing for attention, which means you actually are you are the top game in town of attention. And the challenge is, like, especially within academia or educational institutions. I used to be in sales. I sold for General Mills, and a lot of times people say, well, I'm not in sales. I would never do sales. And I think so much of communication is selling. It's persuading people to pay attention to you, or why they need to be paying attention to your message. And I think thinking about it from that perspective is really gets at this idea of competitive presence.
Which leads to the invitational, which is,
Yes.
as you write, the hardest type of presence, but could also potentially be the most rewarding.
So I love just the idea of thinking about invitational because we always we had more opportunities for this invitational space. What I define invitational is I'm not trying to convince you of something. So it's not competitive because I'm not trying to persuade you. I'm trying to have a conversation with you. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I would like you to understand my perspective. It's much more of a dialogue. We had so much more space for a dialogue before um, cell phones. Not to say people did it all the time, but the constant distraction of a digital device in someone's hand immediately has an impact on how much I'm willing to share or how much I am motivated to be a part of a conversation. All the research says just putting your phone down versus up makes me
Mm-hmm.
more likely to want to talk to you versus not. So invitational presence is in creating an invitational space where another person will want to have conversation with you. That means creating a condition of safety. The person feels safe talking, they feel valued by you, and they feel free to express what they're thinking about. And the more that we are in budgeted presence, the less we are ever in an invitational. So if we say think back to the beginning, and I said I think we spent default is in budgeted presence almost 90% of our days, 80% of our day is budgeted. That means we're hardly ever in an invitational unless we make a conscientious decision to really think about who do I need to be talking to, and looking back over the day, thinking what is my diet of invitational space today, and how much time did I spend, and who are the people that matter to me in my life, or people that matter to me in terms of like relationally, from a family standpoint or work standpoint, that I need to be spending that close time with. How many have I been doing that? So it really requires very, very focused intention, like the other ones don't. Is not in the same way.
Yeah, and one of the things that even with this, and I thought technology has ways to kind of catch up with it. For instance, there's the do not disturb function. So every time I get into
Yeah.
a meeting, I already have it on for this recording. So everything on my phone and my laptop no pings, no messages, no emails will come through because
Yeah.
I'm giving you this, my all. However, it is also hard, particularly virtually, because this got published in 2020 around COVID time when everything had to basically be virtual since we couldn't
Hmm.
really do anything in person.
Yeah.
And you wanted to do face to face, but do you look at the camera?
Yeah.
Because you're not eye to eye if I'm looking at your face. If you look
Right.
at the camera, then you're not eye to eye either. You're looking at the
Right.
camera, you know? So
Yeah.
I know that I'm doing, as podcasting grew, I was always in podcast, not always, but I had been working in podcasting for quite a few years. And so when, again, COVID lockdown happened, we were a little
Hmm.
concerned that it was going to drop, but it
Hmm.
actually grew. People wanted to feel like someone was in the house, that they were in some
Hmm.
sort of conversation, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But so did podcasting in video with video format.
Hmm.
And much to my annoyance, a lot of the podcasts that I would either co-host on or help produce with wanted to start doing video. So now I did have to,
Hmm.
brush my hair and put on makeup and all that stuff. But it is hard because I want to get, like, I'm now training myself to look at the camera, and
Right.
I've maneuvered where the video portion of my guest is trying as much as possible to be right under the camera so
Right.
I can see
Yep.
their face,
Yep.
because I know that the viewers are watching more and
Hmm.
more, particularly
Yep.
younger audiences. And excuse me. And I'm hoping that this Safe Passages helps for younger audiences to be educated on safer practices with technology and digital media and travel.
Yep.
So I think it's more important for me to try and look at the camera than it is to look
Hmm.
at the guest.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to be invitational too. It's very
Yeah.
difficult.
No, no, I think you're making a really good point because how often am I having a very intentional, close, careful conversation and I'm looking at myself at the same time, right? It's a very weird situation. In some ways, you can have a more invitational, to your point, invitational conversation maybe with someone on the phone when you're not looking at them. Um, you like, for example, a performance evaluation. I think an invitational space is definitely on the phone rather than a Zoom call where you're just looking at the person, they're looking at you, they're looking at themselves, hearing this information from you. It's not nearly this, it's not the same as face to face. So it's really important to think about how do we create this context where someone feels valued and feel free to speak the way they want to and feel safe in the environment to speak. I think you're hitting on really important points, especially as it relates to video.
Yeah. And when it goes back to the invitational, you were saying, when do you know, when should you consider choosing invitational? You were saying, well, think about where you are, who you're with, and what are you talking about.
Right. And
Did you want
I
to
act
elaborate a little bit on
Yes,
those?
I actually think thinking about that for each of them is really helpful. You know, where am I, right? Am I in a space where this type of conversation makes sense? You know, if I'm in budget, where am I? Am I in a space where people can see me budget and is that going to make them upset? Or am I so distracted that's going to have an impact? Like, so where am I? Who am I with? How much do I value in that relationship? How interdependent am I on that relationship? What is the goal for that conversation? And that which gets to messaging, what is it that I'm trying to talk about? And so I think just thinking of those three questions really helps you to make a decision about which of these different types of presence you should be in. And I think I was writing this, like you said, during COVID, and I had some COVID examples, but it'd been built on 15 years of research looking at how digital devices had such an impact on the way on our interpersonal interactions. And I think post COVID, it's been even more the case because we had years of setting this norm where it was okay for digital devices to invade some space where it normally didn't. And so now it's almost like um, carving out this invitational space is something that people actually don't have a hard time understanding or know what to do. And I'm getting more and more people asking about professional development or helping people think about, okay, I was in school, now I'm going into a workplace. How is it that how do you create invitational space in a workplace? And what does that mean for status? Or students that will just knock on a door and walk in because they want the relationship, but don't recognize that that's completely inappropriate in a workplace. So it's really interesting what's happening now as we're trying to better understand how to navigate these spaces. But where am I? What am I trying to talk about, and who am I talking to are really important questions to ask when making those decisions.
And there are, in the book, you have great reflections and exercises even to allow people to really think about, and even suggestions of the next time you want to try, getting people to, if you want to be the one to have the entitled presence, you're like, pay attention to me,
Hmm.
or invitational, or
Hmm.
budgeted, or something like that. And it's a great book. I mentioned in it. Haha. Thank you.
Because
Thank you very
Tara,
much.
you were such an inspiration to me. Because when you're thinking about research and you're excited about it, to have someone else get so excited and engaged, and I'm just to tell your audience, I mean, Tara's already, she's is a great interviewer, so she's very thoughtful and empathic and thinks about others, but her ability to really think about pushed me to think about, well, what are these different contexts, and she helped me make some videos to think through it and understand it. I mean, she um she really lives these ideas, and so it's really has been inspirational just to be a part of your journey too, and to have you talk about it. It means so much to me.
Oh, thank you. Well, where can people find this book and all that stuff?
Okay, well, absolutely. So you can, so Georgetown Press, I think they go through Johns Hopkins Press. So Georgetown Press, you can get, I think it's like 15% discount if you go through their press. So that's something, or they absolutely email me if you'd like to think about a discount at Georgetown, turnerjw at georgetown.edu. But also Amazon, it's available on Amazon as well. So you could, any one of those places. And if any of your listeners are thinking about it or would like to have more questions and ask about it, I'd love to hear their thoughts or hear how they're thinking about it. I'd love to hear more. I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect that way. Any one of those places.
Yeah, thank you. I will share it in the show notes as well. And I
Okay.
think it's a really great way of what did they say? They're like the first step to admitting there's a problem,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
to admit that
The
there's a
first step in
problem.
solving exactly is
Solving.
admitting. And I feel like if many people think they don't have a problem, but they definitely can identify people in their life that could use the book. So,
Yeah, and I
as
think
advice. Yeah.
education of
Yeah.
understanding, most people don't realize that there are terms of, oh, this is what I've been doing 90% of my time at least, is
Right.
budgeted presence.
Right.
What are the benefits and what are the costs?
Right. And
That
I
kind
think
of
you're
stuff.
right about the terms, just having something to talk about, like, are you in this presence, or I need you to be in this presence, or I'm going to ask for entitled presence, meaning I need your attention and this is why I need it, and help me understand if this can work for you. I'm going to give you a warning that on Wednesday I need your
Hmm.
complete attention, and this is why it matters to you. So thinking about how can I be intentional in the way I talk about these different strategies can be really helpful in interpersonal relationships as well as at work.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Turner. And yeah, till next time.
Oh, thank you so much, Tara. It's so nice to be with you today, and you're just a wonderful person to be present with.
Thank you.